The Art of Psychological Warfare. History of Psychological Warfare. Chapter 1. When it comes to psychological warfare, how effective is it? How much damage can you inflict on another person without even touching them? Here are a few examples of how powerful it is to wield this kind of power. Henry Alexander Murray, as head of the Psychological Clinic, took involved in the SIA's Project MKUltra from 1959 to 1962. These were torturous psychological tests designed to assess test subjects under duress. One test, however, stands out in history. Volunteer university students were required to submit an essay that outlined their philosophy on life and the things they believed in as part of the test. They'd then be taken to a debating chamber, where they were told they'd be able to discuss their ideas with a fellow student. Instead, they'd be confronted with a professional interrogator whose duty it was to criticize and insult the pupils based on their own convictions, browbeating them out of every core virtue they thought was good in the world. Because the entire experiment was designed to put the student through as much stress as possible, students were left shaken and disturbed. Ted Kaczynski, a 17-year-old genius who had already made an effect in the realm of advanced mathematical research, was one of these students. However, history knows this student better via the alias he adopted after being dismissed from academia and eventually resigning. Ted Kaczynski went on to become the Unabomber, a serial killer who carried out a mail bombing campaign against universities from 1978 until 1995 before being apprehended. We'll return to Project MKUltra later since it's crucial to understanding psychological warfare. For instance, British actor Benedict Cumberbatch was entangled in a real-life dilemma in 2005 that matched a scene from one of his own films. While filming in South Africa, a car he was riding in blew a tire on a lonely road, and he was ambushed by a band of armed robbers in the dangerous outback. He was kidnapped, but he managed to talk himself out of it. To avoid being tied up and placed into the car trunk, he first pretended to have a heart issue. Then, as a well-known British actor, he persuaded them that while he was worth almost nothing as a hostage, harming him would cause international headlines, which would lead to war. The captors left him unhurt in a nearby community before speeding away. That's what you call putting on a show for the rest of your life. Acting, as one might expect, provides a wide range of abilities to psychological warfare. Niccolò Machiavelli, an Italian Renaissance author, was a well-known proponent and codifier of numerous psychological warfare techniques, so much so that he coined the word Machiavellianism, which refers to the use of deception and cunning in business. Every corrupt politician has at least skimmed through a few pages of Machiavelli's The Prince. Machiavelli's views are still used as the foundation for a large corpus of business literature today. Modern business books educate how to keep control, manipulate others, and make difficult management decisions that are still beneficial to the company's bottom line. One could argue that, in this case, when we form a business and give it the same rights as a human being, what incorporating entails, without confining it to any moral constraints other than survive at all costs and make your stockholders rich, we have basically created an institutionalized psychopath. Many more lessons from the business world will be used in this content. George Washington, no less, pulled off a superb psychological warfare coup on March 15, 1783. The incident is known as the Newburgh Address in history books. The Newburgh Conspiracy was a group of Continental Army officers who wanted to mount a military revolt against the newly formed United States Congress. Washington was not scheduled to appear at a conference to pacify the rebels and try to stop the movement, but he showed up nonetheless. The surprised intended speaker handed the podium over to Washington, who ascended the stage in front of the armed and boisterous rebel mob. It's Washington's ingenious ploy before the address that matters here, not the text of the address itself. "Gentlemen, you will enable me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only gotten gray but virtually blind in the service of my nation," he remarked, fumbling in his pocket for his spectacles. This made the men realize that the legend before them had gone through considerably more suffering and sacrifice than they had. The rebels were shocked and disappointed by the realization, and many of them immediately laid down their weapons and fled in tears of shame. The address itself is public information, but this is only one example of how a nation's forefathers might deploy psychological warfare to great effect. Results. Some of the concepts in this audio may appear divisive. They are, without a doubt. All unexpected concepts are startling, and all fresh concepts are odd. That's why they're new. You've never seen anything like them before. Try to come up with something entirely unique that doesn't come across as startling. It has little to do with ideas and everything to do with originality. We'll be learning a lot more history classes in the future. Let's move on to the lesson for now so we can learn how to use this power for ourselves. The most fundamental aspect of adopting psychological warfare methods is to understand psychology. This will take some patience, so we'll attempt to make the next 2 chapters as enjoyable and brief as possible. However, don't skim over it. It is the cornerstone upon which the rest of the content is built. Takeaways. Recognize that you still have a lot to learn. Develop a respectful approach toward this art form. It's not a word to be taken lightly. How to read people. Chapter 2. Ironically, the one thing that will improve your psychological warfare skills will also be the first line of defense against it. While an in-depth understanding of psychology is unattainable for this audio, you'd need a university degree to go along with it. Portions of it are crucial to our theme, and they all begin with reading people. Because you're trying to manipulate, power struggle, and psychologically dominate individuals, it's crucial to be able to read people. Keeping an eye out for tells and indicators can help you figure out what's working and what isn't, where a person's flaws lie, and what might lead to a truce. Did we use the word truce? Make no mistake about it. Right now is the time to act, even though we're talking about psychological warfare. If your victim caves in, you've already won. It's a huge win to be able to mentally control someone without them even realizing it. It's a win if they agree with you, bargain with you, or offer to work with you to find a solution. This isn't about getting what you want. It's about getting what you need. Body language is an important aspect of communication. Body language refers to the nonverbal communication that all humans engage in, whether or not they are aware of it. For our goals, it's critical to understand not just how to interpret other people's body language, but also how to regulate your own to get the desired effect. Find a dog-owning buddy if you're having trouble understanding body language. Dogs are a great way to learn about body language because they are so expressive. They are incredibly expressive and can relate to humans, but they are unable to communicate. A dog who wants to go out for some outdoor exercise with their master will frolic and jump around, demonstrating how much fun they're going to have. When an aggressive dog barks at the mailman, it will bristle and stand erect, snarling and preparing to pounce. This is a signal that it is about to strike. A dog who has just knocked over a vase and caused it to break will lower its head and look at its master meekly, as though it is embarrassed by its mistake. Look at animated cartoons like Tom and Jerry for another example of non-human expressive body language. Despite the fact that the 2 characters have no conversation, they manage to transmit a wide range of emotions, sentiments, and aims to the audience as they scamper about on their excursions. Analyzing the pantomime of silent characters in animation makes you realize how much of a fine craft it is. At the same time, keep in mind that this is kid-friendly entertainment, demonstrating the importance of intuitive body language in communicating. Recognizing when your opponent is hostile to you or rebellious of you should be the goals of learning body language for psychological warfare. Detecting a person's vulnerability. Fear and anxiety can be detected. Taking use of signals supplied by your target. Strategically adjusting your own body language and posture. A comprehensive collection of examples of every type of body language is beyond the scope of this content. There are entire books dedicated to this subject. Instead, we'll use the following examples. Adjusting spectacles. This indicates skepticism or a desire to pay more attention. Preening is the act of putting on a show for the other sex. When women walk, they twirl their hair, bite their lips, and swagger their hips. But men stride with their head high, flex their muscles, put out their chest, and proudly hold their head up. The Captain Morgan pose, as depicted on the rum bottle, is a well-known macho pose. Knee cocked, foot up and propped on something, rest of body straight, chest out, head back, in a confident state of relaxation. It's a territorial position. As the name implies, I've conquered this location or difficulty and come out on top. As if I were a hero, address me as such. Facepalm is a term that has gained a lot of traction on the internet. That was so foolish I can't believe it. Is universally expressed by clapping a hand to your face near the eyes. A librarian will inform you that putting your finger to your lips implies SHH. Stay quiet. Any motion aimed at the mouth can be interpreted as don't talk or speak softly. People put a thoughtful hand over their mouth when they have to stop and think about what to say. When someone is lying, they often place their hand to their mouth. It's as if they were trying to fix or mask what they were saying while they were saying it. As if they were saying, this isn't the real me talking. Rubbing the back of the head or neck. This is a nervous motion that can be used to appear nonchalant. It's a subliminal grooming cue. Is there something wrong with this place? There's nothing wrong. Many movements involving the hands and head, in general, should be a red flag that the individual is not telling the truth in some way. Anything that sounds like a frantic outburst or squirming is questionable. Looking away, averting one's eyes is a typical "I don't like that" gesture. The students who are being bullied at school stare down. When witnesses to a vehicle accident see a bloodied victim, they turn their heads away. When a person decides not to buy something, they stop looking at it. When a child refuses to eat his vegetables, he raises his brows to the ceiling. When you roll your eyes at anything someone says, it means "I think you're insane." We'll go over eye contact in more detail later because it's so crucial in both giving and receiving. Slouching. This portrays a person who is distant, casual, and not at all aware or vigilant, whether standing in a relaxed stance or sprawled all over the furniture. "I know something you don't," he says, tapping his nose with his finger. Hand on cheek. This is a nonverbal expression that communicates "I'm bored" or "I'm tired." When the head is tilted sideways, the effect is amplified. "I'm ready for bed. See, this is my head on the pillow." The individual is miming. The global gesture, meaning that's unusual, is a head tilted by itself, something you've never seen before, and you're only now recognizing it. Something strange about a scenario that intrigues, perplexes, or otherwise astonishes you. It's so common that even animals engage in it. It's a reflex that occurs when you come across an unexpected object and want to see it from a fresh perspective. The global symbol for "I'm not accepting this" is crossed arms. The person has stopped listening to you, is preparing to fight you, or is dubious of your authority. This is only a small portion of the body language lexicon. While you may not be interested in all of it, becoming more aware of it will help you. The guy who pays more attention than everyone else can dominate the entire world. Takeaways. Make use of your body language to assess your opponent. To sway your opponent, alter your own body language. While conversing with your opponent, keep an eye on their reactions and body language terminology. Use your body language awareness to quietly influence any conversation. Reading in the cold. The term cold reading derives from the world of hypnotists, fortune tellers, and stage magicians who try or seem to have psychic abilities. Cold reading, like body language, is a series of observations you can make to learn more about a subject without having to engage them in dialogue. You might as well treat yourself to a few party tricks while you're learning all of this wonderful stuff. Here's an example of a stage psychic script. In a studio, walk out in front of a crowd of about 900 people. Begin by explaining that the visions you receive may make more sense to the audience than they do to you, and that if they can assist you by responding to your cues, you will be able to piece together some answers together. You want the audience to pounce on whatever you say and turn it into a story. Begin with "Who is Betty?" There could be a Betty in a gathering of 900 people. If not, each of them knows approximately 150 people on average, so you're bound to run across a Betty someplace. Keep an eye on the reactions. Anyone who responds is either Betty or someone who knows Betty. They'll let you know. Betty was someone they knew. You have a flashback to a Betty from the past. Was she a close friend of yours? Betty was almost certainly the subject's aunt, sister, mother, etc. Continue speaking these until you are no longer able to. Betty is their long-lost great-aunt, it turns out. Continue to prod them until they reveal the details of their relationship with Betty. Betty died of breast cancer in the 1990s, so the target knew her when they were children. So, when you were a kid, did you pay Betty a visit? Every summer in Cape Cod? Yes, Betty has sent you a message of comfort from beyond the grave, telling you how much she loved you. And I'm getting something red. The target will run to a red outfit, a red toy wagon, a red car. Say anything about the car, whether it's a fond recollection or not. The target will concoct a story in their imagination about how this wonderful clairvoyant communicated to her great-aunt Betty's spirit and even knew about the red rocking horse in her living room. I picture a male character, a father figure in the past, someone with whom you had a disagreement but who wants you to know they loved you anyway. Says another prompt. I sense a woman with blackness in her chest, as if she had heart disease, or I sense a woman with blackness in her chest, as if she had heart disease. Someone will obligingly stand up and exclaim, I know who you're talking about. If this applies to at least half of the people in a random sample. However, the above script does not occur by itself. They're probes with a statistically likely likelihood of being true when you start tossing out their clues. Once they've caught on, you can provide further guiding cues to help them narrow down the perceived event. You'll notice a variety of reactions from the subject, which you may use to determine whether or not you're on the correct track. Here's how to save a clip. People who look up are recalling a fact or remembering an actual occurrence. People who gaze to the side or down are either imagining something that didn't happen or thinking about something that isn't true. Other patterns of eye behavior, such as glancing to the left while thinking about the past and to the right when thinking about the future, are seen in some persons, but not all. The Barnum effect includes cold reading as a subset. It's where you make a vague, fuzzy statement that may apply to practically everyone that someone will personalize as if it were particular to them. And it's named after circus mogul P.T. Barnum. Here's an example of your horoscope. You have a strong desire to be popular and well-liked, but you may also be extremely bashful. While you may be critical of yourself at times, you also possess latent potential that you could utilize. You may wonder if you made the proper decision at times. You take pride in being a critical thinker who demands proof for things you don't believe. You've lately lost a loved one, and you're looking forward to a small sum of money and a brief but unforgettable journey. Wasn't it spot on? It does, however, apply to everyone. The well-known palm reading method is another form of cold reading. The trick is to take their hand in yours, but only lightly, because their hand will move around and subconsciously tell you things. They'll open up their hand further and lift it towards your face when you deliver them good news or something that's true. Tell me more, says the narrator. If you give them terrible news or tell them something that isn't real, they will curl their hand up and pull it back, saying, I've had enough. Understanding cold reading entails grasping the universality of human existence and shared experiences. This knowledge will aid you in your quest to master psychological warfare. Read people's body language, eye cues, facial expression, and voice tone when you're communicating with them. Look for indicators of nervousness, optimism, skepticism, and so on, and then ask yourself why they are feeling that way. We spoke with a local psychology specialist who consented to reveal the following as an example of psychological tactics employing metaphysical nonsense. I met some charlatans who owned a new age shop full of love potions and tarot cards when I was working my way through college with odd jobs. The psychology behind it piqued my interest. I quickly picked up on some of your deception techniques. The most important thing to remember is that people enjoy being duped. Anyone who enters into a psychic booth already believes you're real. All you have to do now is play into their dream. Prompting is your most effective tactic. All you have to say is something along the lines of, I sense someone in your life has lately passed away. You're right on the money statistically. They'll start talking about their deceased Uncle Harry and tell you all kinds of things you'd never guess. I can see one particular memory of your Uncle Harry very clearly. I see the color red. Now say, oh, Harry once wore red clothes, drove a red automobile, and had a red-collared cat. They'll tell their pals afterwards that you knew all there was to know about their Uncle Harry, including what color automobile he drove. You don't know anything since they don't tell you. Amazing. The power of suggestion is the best. We had some crystals that we planned to sell. It's as simple as putting up a crystal to their hand and muttering, tell me when you feel anything, as you charge your energy field into their chakra. Because they're taking part in this ridiculous ceremony, they'll convince themselves that their hand is warming up, or that you're squeezing their cuticle, or that you're channeling the hand of their long-dead great-grandfather. It's all a load of crap. Nothing here is more advanced than the ordinary prostitute's skill set. They're looking for a fantasy, and you're the one who can give it to them. This can be done while half asleep. You can compare it to a game of poker. In poker, you look for tells, which are small body language indicators that reveal what your opponent is thinking. Simply make a broad, general statement, then follow the subject's cues to the detailed specifics. Because we live in an age with little face-to-face contact and connection, this is an uncommon ability in our day and age. The majority of our human engagement has been supplanted by electronic communications. When it comes to relating to others on a personal level, a lack of practice dulls our edge. That is to say, being a little bit skilled at it is equivalent to having a superpower. Reading tactics lead to psychological manipulation, but there's still a lot to think about. Takeaways. To read people's minds, use cold reading. The more you know about what they don't say out loud, the better. Use the Barnum effect to make broad remarks about the individual you wish to persuade, which they will interpret as personal. Use people's willingness to be duped to persuade them to do your bidding in a subtle way. Impress anyone you want to influence with your eerie reading abilities. It's almost like casting a spell on some. Culture and social status. Important note. In the future, we'll have to say somewhere that if any of our points discrediting whatever you believe in offends you, you'll just have to live with it. You can't be a good psychological combatant while believing in hard religion, pseudoscience, or superstitions. Belief in these things makes your targets more vulnerable. Instead of falling for them, you should be exploiting them. When reading individuals, the assumptions you make will vary based on who you're working with. People with various backgrounds have varying frames of reference. You'll observe that fraudulent psychics and religious faith healers prey on the poorer classes. For example, cheap superstitions and get-rich-quick schemes are no exception. Examine the supermarket tabloid selection to observe how they cater to sleazy hobbies and bread and circuses. People from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to fall prey to such schemes. This is because persons from affluent families are more likely to have a college education, if not a university degree. This at the very least exposes children to skepticism, discussion skills, and some learning. Detectives use a technique known as the Sherlock scan, in which they look someone over and over, trying to learn as much as possible about their social status. You can be relatively certain you're dealing with a professional with a degree and a six-figure salary if you're dealing with someone dressed in a three-piece suit and tie, wearing an expensive watch, and wearing high-end shoes. A man with filthy hands and a dirty blue jumpsuit, on the other hand, is most likely an engineer or auto mechanic. Isn't it simple to do? This is obvious sense, but you can take it a step further by putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. Appealing to a person's interests and principles can help you persuade them. A stay-at-home mother of 5 children will have different values than a New York lawyer, and a corporate CEO will have different interests and values than a drug dealer in the inner city. While we're on the subject of disclaimers, here's another. Now is also the moment to stop discriminating against people based on their race, gender, orientation, or creed. When it comes to reading people, holding on to biased beliefs can only muddy your judgment. Furthermore, your disdain of someone only because of their skin color or sexual orientation will be picked up by that person, putting individuals on the defensive unnecessarily. When it comes to psychological warfare, the only thing that matters is winning, regardless of pride or prejudice. Practice measuring folks up wherever you go as a warm-up workout. Combine your skills in cold reading, body language, and judging people's backgrounds to get a read on people you see on a daily basis. But the most important thing to understand about people everywhere is that they all want to be accepted. This is, in fact, the default option for the whole human race. Every subculture has folks who are only there to be cool, and they make up the majority. Religion, politics, philosophy, heroin use, having children, punk rock, bikers, BDSM, hackers, geeks, and hipsters are all topics that come up in conversations. Professors, 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 professors. Professor people spend their entire lives trying to please others because they are frightened of being immobilized if they do not receive their approval. This is why peer pressure is so effective. The saying monkey see, monkey do derives from this. This is why religions are so difficult to eradicate. This is why they sell t-shirts and bumper stickers. Who cares if your child was an honor student? This is why they promote beverages based on the image the product conveys rather than the features of the product. Buy Mountain Dew, they urge. It tastes better and has more caffeine and sugar to give you extra energy. They don't sell it with extreme sports enthusiasts plunging off mountains on dirt motorcycles or parachuting off bridges. Take a look at how awesome these individuals are. You'll be cool if you drink this. This is why children will urge their mothers to buy them sugary cereal with a cartoon character on the box, regardless of how bad it tastes. This is why, at the age of 40, people experience a midlife crisis. They went to school to earn a degree and begin a career in a field they had no interest in because their parents insisted. Arranged marriages are common because of this. This is why there are openly gay people who marry for the sake of looks. The majority of human social contact, business, culture, and politics are all driven by this. Oh, and what about those Facebook-like buttons? You know why you get a small jolt every time they raise your score. You've just received peer approval, and now it's time to move forward. Validation of the class, and that makes us all monkeys happy. Takeaways. To comprehend your opponent, use your awareness of what we share in common. To obtain a deeper insight of your opponent's nature, combine your human behavior observation abilities with body language and cold reading. Empathy. Finally, there's the issue of empathy to round out our lesson on reading your target. Empathy is the ability to see things from another person's perspective. So far in the novel, we've been building up to this. Empathy can help you figure out whether your target is weak and giving in, or strong and assertive. Empathy is the part of psychological warfare that is most creative. To see someone argue with their wife, then go out and kick their car, and understand that they're angry with their wife and not with their car. It takes a bit of imagination. Empathy is a skill that takes a lot of practice to master. You're lucky if you were born with it. Otherwise, you'll have to work for it. Our upcoming chapters will assist you in learning empathy. But if you don't have it, you might not be the best psychological warrior on the planet. Some people are simply born cold fish and have little control over their fate. However, if you aren't affected by autism, there is still hope for you. Takeaways: develop your ability to read people through body language, cold reading, and scanning for background and culture clues from the environment. Empathy is something that can be developed. Saying the right words to touch people deeply at the right time can catch them off guard and open them up to you. So it's a powerful skill. What makes people tick? Why can't we work together to solve all of our problems and live in peace? To that question, there are no reasonable answers. However, there are a variety of spur-of-the-moment theories available. And all you need is one that works right now. Not only have we evolved from lower beings, but we may have only just begun to evolve, and it will take millions of years for us to achieve our goals. Regrettably, we are trapped in the present moment. This means that everyone reading this is living a life that is almost entirely meaningless. Animals are what we are. We can try to achieve immortality through our work, but 99% of what is worth saving is trampled into the dirt by subsequent generations of animals. Because we refuse to work together, most of humanity's problems are unsolvable. At the very least, not without prioritizing our own self-interest. We may be ready to collaborate to solve our problems millions of years from now, when we've progressed further down the evolutionary tree. But by that time, almost everything we know now will be hazy myths, occasionally excavated by archaeologists, but dismissed as baffling. The only thing we can do is try to build bridges between the few people who have some sense, paving the way for our successors to begin tackling humanity's problems as soon as possible. As a jumpstart strategy, consider it. It may or may not work, but it has the best chance of succeeding of any strategy we can think of. We are nothing more than apes. We are apes, not apes that evolved from them. Even our most illustrious members are only marginally superior to the worst of us. To save us from total despair, we have the hope of a vastly improved future for humanity. In the last couple of centuries, we've seen a few small steps forward. Putting a man on the moon, inventing computers, and doubling our natural lifespan are all examples of human achievements. To us, they appear to be enormous accomplishments. Yes, and a dog thinks he's smart for being able to fetch a ball. We, even our highest achievers, are primitive savages in the eyes of the future. Truly civilized human looking back at us, just as we look back on the Stone Age as a time of primitive savagery. Indeed, recognizing that, as a species, we are still too immature to progress could be the first step toward that progressive future. This is not to be confused with nihilism. This isn't to say that we should cause suffering and madness simply because why not? This is a symptom of our savage nature. We should continue to act in a way that makes Earth the most perfect paradise we are capable of creating, so that our future evolved selves can get a head start once more. It doesn't mean we can't be happy animals just because we're still animals. That's as far as we can get into the realm of the cosmic. But it's a workable philosophy for your everyday questions and the purposes of this content. Takeaways: keep some philosophy on hand to help you frame your interactions with others. Recognize the difference between a person's response and that of a pre-evolved monkey. Primal responses are instinctive and emotional in nature. How to be likable. Chapter 3. How to size up your intended targets was discussed in the previous chapter. We'll discuss how to take a similar approach to how you present yourself in this chapter. Why should it matter how others perceive you? We take no shortcuts to victory in psychological warfare. It's a win if your opponent thinks you're cute. It's a win if your target realizes you're manipulating them but still gives in because they've had enough. It's a win if your target is aware that you're conniving them but is powerless to stop you because you've intimidated them. The most thrilling battle was one in which one of the participants was completely unaware that they were fighting. It's crucial to make a good first impression on other people. After all, you're attempting social engineering, so you'll only need yourself. You'll need to put together the best version of yourself you can. Socialization. We constantly hear about the modern-day socially isolated person's stereotype. They have a difficult time interacting with others. They have no idea how to socialize. They find it difficult to communicate with people they don't know. They aren't allowed to leave the house very often. So, what's the issue? People with a proclivity for Asperger's syndrome appear to thrive in today's society in Western culture. People spend more time dealing with machines than with people because tech careers are in high demand. There are fewer siblings because families are smaller. There are fewer elders to converse with and interact with. To make ends meet, single-parent families require at least one parent to work full-time. Of course, the electronic devices that we all find so useful obstruct our ability to interact with others. Many of us prefer to communicate online rather than face-to-face. There are many simple ways to socialize, but they all require you to get out more. Join a club, group, or organization as your first mission. All clubs are social clubs, regardless of the focus of these organizations. Join a group that is associated with a hobby, interest, or pursuit you have. A group that meets once a week in a public space is ideal. Make new friends by going there aggressively. Find other shy people on the outskirts and invite them in. Help with activities is something you can offer. Bars and nightclubs should be avoided. These are stereotypical places where people go to socialize, but they're really just traps where you can waste money while getting wasted and listening to music that's way too loud to have a conversation. Volunteering is mission number 2. Make a time donation to a local charity. It's amazing that more people don't do this because it's social gold in so many ways. Have you ever noticed how a person's attractiveness is instantly multiplied when they help others without expecting anything in return? Make sandwiches for the homeless, clean up a shelter, raise money for disease research, and pay a visit to a nursing home. Support the library in your neighborhood. Alternatively, get involved in politics by canvassing for your preferred candidate. Volunteering looks great on a resume, gives you a sense of purpose in the world, and allows you to get out and socialize all at the same time. You'll have a great time with your fellow volunteers. You'll make connections for future networking, and you'll grow as a person as a result of the experience. Takeaways: develop and hone your interpersonal abilities. It's impossible to have too much of anything. Make use of your social skills to persuade and subdue your targets mentally. Use everything you've learned about people to your advantage when interacting with them. Charisma. What is it about some people that attracts them to social situations? They're the life of the party and the engine behind the company. They're born leaders. All they have to do is speak, and the entire room will turn to listen to them. They wield such dominance over the rest of the world. How did we become so well-liked? This is, once again, a skill that is well-honed. Here are some tips to help you improve your charisma, which you can put to use while you're busy socializing with all of the suggestions above. Smile. That is the most important charismatic tip. Never show the world that you're a shriveled ball of misery and angst on the inside. If you don't feel it, act it out until you do. Everyone will flock to you if you are the ray of sunshine. Don't be so serious about yourself. At the very least, don't pretend to be someone you aren't. Maintain a relaxed and unassuming demeanor, as if you're just trying to make ends meet. Never pass judgment on someone else. Be the type of person who follows the golden rule unless it directly relates to a current point of tactical warfare. Say nothing at all if you can't say something nice. If you tell Alice you think Bob is cheating, she will wonder what you say about her when she isn't around. Praise others ecstatically. People are so stingy with compliments that you'd think they had to sign them in blood, as if they were candy. Distribute them. Say something positive about what someone does, has, or says. It's really simple. People will like you if you make them feel better. Pay complete attention to other people. Nothing compares to being the sole focus of someone's attention. Put your phone away. Don't look at your watch or computer screen all the time. And don't scan the horizon as if a stampede is approaching. Take a close look at the person with whom you're conversing. You should pay twice as much attention to what you're saying than you do to what you're saying. The second most basic and effective rule, after smiling, is to smile. When you listen, you should be completely focused on the other person, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. Some people listen to others talk as if they were waiting for a red light to turn green in a car. This sounds like a book about how to be popular in high school, or with all of the socializing and charisma. However, we must emphasize that this is a psychological battle. If you're a well-socialized and charismatic individual, you'll have an advantage. Also, high school should not be dismissed. Many people never mentally graduate from high school, and we're sure you can come up with a few examples. Takeaways: to become a naturally charming and influential person, work on your charisma. Use your charisma to subdue and convert potential enemies into allies, taking away your barriers. Last but not least, learn how to appear less threatening and more approachable. You're probably a bold and confident person if you're good at psychological tactics. What if you don't have faith in yourself? That's something I'll work on. To be self-assured, you must possess the ability to do so. Live your life in full force, instead of letting life happen to you like a reality show. Go on adventures, get lost, and then find your way back. Allow no obstacle to stand in your way of overcoming your goals. Care about how things will turn out, and then work your tail off to make sure they do. After a few years of this, there isn't a challenge you can't overcome by saying, well, I survived that other time, so I'll survive this. Don't be a mouse, be a lion. Don't be a tyrant. Instead, strive to be noble while remaining a lion. You'll stand your ground against something bigger and badder than you at some point, and it'll kill you, but you'll die with no regrets because your life was lived to the fullest. Bold, self-assured people, on the other hand, can intimidate some people. You must understand that fear is a characteristic of the human race as a whole. Fear is at the heart of most political conflict. Fear drives us to construct walls and fences to keep each other out. We are afraid of social isolation, financial failure, poor health, and dying alone. Fears play out in wars. Until proven otherwise, you must assume that everyone you speak with is a fearful and timid bunny rabbit. This is the section where you'll learn how to gain people's trust. Put on a winning outfit. It makes no difference if you don't have $1 million wardrobe. Being neat and tidy, as well as well-groomed, is more important. Taking care of yourself will encourage others to do the same. There's also the adage that if you dress like a winner, the world will treat you that way. It's how people treat you that makes a difference. People will let you do anything if you are well-dressed and groomed, have a vague air of authority, and have a lot of confidence. Backstage, infiltrate the stockroom, barge down hospital corridors, and march into the command center as if you own it. You can give people orders and they will comply without question. You'll have the ability to take command in any situation. Possess a good sense of humor. Nothing can disarm you like a good laugh. When public speakers take the podium, they usually start with a joke or a humorous anecdote. It makes no difference if you aren't a natural comedian. A simple pun or a witty remark can be made by anyone. You can't laugh without smiling, so at the very least get people to laugh. Smiling, even if it's a weak one, makes them more open to you. Don't take yourself too seriously. Once again, make yourself the brunt of the joke at least half of the time while you're working on your sense of humor. Self-deprecating humor works on several levels. It makes people laugh. It demonstrates that you aren't a narcissist, and it gets them on your side, defending you before they realize it. But be careful not to be too harsh on yourself. Make yourself appear as if you're one of the regular people, not as if you're a lower-class individual. This brings us to the end of our look at people skills that aid psychological warfare. If you skipped over this chapter in order to get to the good stuff, you should go back and read it because it is the good stuff. People have achieved celebrity, fortune, and fame by following the advice in this chapter. But first, let's look at our first real weapon, persuasion. Takeaways. Improve your self-assurance to become a more powerful influencer. Make yourself appear to be non-threatening, as in stealth mode. This will both psychologically disarm enemy and increase the trust of those you want to influence. Getting people to agree with you. Chapter 4. Persuading others to agree with you is the pinnacle of psychological dominance. You've succeeded in imposing your will on another person's mind. Every time you accomplish something, no matter how small, you should celebrate it, because it will prepare you for bigger difficulties and will help you gain confidence. When it comes to the art of persuasion, you should always strive to increase your self-assurance. A debater who is shy, retiring, and complacent isn't particularly convincing. When practicing the principles in this chapter, work on having confidence, but make sure it's genuine confidence, not simply phony braggadocio. Bullying or being condescending to your target will turn them off. Instead, approach everything with the mindset that what you're proposing is the most right thing in the universe, and that your arguments are a polite invitation to assist the other person in becoming proper as well. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Linguists Richard Bandler and John Grinder at a California university made a remarkable finding in the 1970s. They proposed that the words we employ not only represent our thoughts, but also form them. We don't just speak for the sake of speaking. We also listen to ourselves, so what we say supports what we've already said. Consider an overweight individual who is obese not as a result of a medical ailment, but rather as a result of binge eating and being a couch potato. If that individual weighs themselves, looks in the mirror, and declares, "Look at me, I'm chubby and unattractive. I'll never be able to get rid of this weight," then that individual has simply locked themselves inside their own cage of negativity. Their prophecy will come to fruition. What's the purpose? Might as well enjoy it. They will continue to live a lifestyle of extravagance. If that individual instead says, "I need to do something about my weight problem," they're on the correct route, but it's still not enough. If you don't have the willpower to follow through on a challenge you issue to yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure. To cut to the chase, here are some more encouraging words from our obese friend. What will happen if I only eat salad today? There is no longer a goal, and there is no setup for disappointment. Inquiries are always an invitation to learn more. If you consume fresh vegetables for one day, you will undoubtedly notice a change. Even if you only feel slightly better, it can help you gain confidence. I'm thinking of going for a walk, or, as they say, baby steps. You're not going to make a resolve to jog 5 kilometers every day because you'll be defeated after a few days. A walk is a simple, enjoyable activity that will make you feel better at the end of the day. It's a minor change, but it's noticeable. I'm going to attempt dieting today. Today I'm going to try to eat only 1,500 calories and see how close I can go. Again, you're not making grand claims about how you're going to alter the world forever. You're carrying out a study. When you do an experiment, you can't go wrong. You'll get a result either way. I'm starting to live a healthier lifestyle. The confidence surge offers a big headwind after a few days on this gradual path to success. Making a change in your life and seeing the benefits is exhilarating. It motivates you to keep going in the same direction. I'm transforming into the person I've always aspired to be. This is the positive self-reinforcement kicking in after a week or two on the treadmill and a new diet. When you describe yourself as a healthy person, you've moved on from being a chubby slob who lounges around and eats their way into a heart attack. Showing that you're on the road to bettering yourself, no matter what shape you're in right now, instantly transforms your identity. Do you see how important it is to use the right words? The similar strategy was discovered by renowned novelist George Orwell. He wrote about a dystopian society that governs the population, in part through language. In his novel 1984, the language is known as Newspeak, and its objective is to mold people's minds. For example, the language lacks no words with which to criticize the administration, because the words we know influence our thoughts. Removing them from our minds shuts off some mental processes. In the 1970s, Duke University's psychology department published a list of words that are power words in a neurolinguistic sense. These words grab your attention and fire up your neurons in the brain. They are simple, health, money. Pay attention to the terms used in commercials the next time you turn on the television. Something along these lines. Our healthy weight loss solution is based on a recent medical breakthrough that has shown to be effective. Try our simple method. We'll send you a free sample if you take advantage of our money-saving offer. We promise you'll love it. It'll be difficult to come across a commercial message that doesn't contain the bulk of the words on this list. Neurolinguistic programmers, or brain hackers, propose the following strategy for persuading others to agree with you. By subtly replicating what your target does, you can build rapport. If they're pacing, you're pacing. And if they're scratching, you're scratching. This is a subliminal message you're sending to their mind. See, we're on the same page. Remember the body language portion from earlier in this audio. Start by saying things that are self-evident and require no effort to accept. Make an effort to communicate their own opinions aloud. Anything you say is a good step as long as it gets their head nodding in agreement with you. Start slipping your own thoughts into the conversation. Smooth transitions should be used here. To show that the notion they agreed with leads them to your new thought, use phrases like because, then, likewise, while, as, hence, or and so. Observe their reactions to guide this method. If they reject your hypothesis, step back and agree with them. Then repeat the cycle, using a different set of statements to get back to your initial conclusion. Here are some debating strategies that can be used when using the above method. Try to modify the tempo at the step when you're mirroring your target's body language. See if you can pick up the tempo. They'll pick up the pace because of your step. If they do, you've gained power of them. Try scratching your nose or adjusting your legs while sitting to see if they copy you. If they do, you're now the puppeteer. Normalization. Do you have a wild idea? Begin by putting out an even more extreme concept. This is a ploy that children are familiar with. If you want a dog, first request a pony from your parents. Negotiate for a puppy instead if they say no. This is a logic trap in which you establish an outlandish limit for someone, which they dismiss as being too extreme. And then you agree with them and propose a new limit that is, by their definition, more acceptable. The neurolinguistic programmer's most useful technique is reframing. Anything can be reframed in a different way. You may redefine things for the rest of your life. Is it possible that your target has rejected your strategy? Reframe it as a beginning point and offer to work with you to reach an agreement. Did they express displeasure with your deception? Rephrase it as I'm sorry you feel that way about what I said, rather than I'm sorry you feel that way about what I said. Reframe their disagreement as an agreement, regardless of how they differ. Politicians are well versed in this tactic. Anchoring. In our step, We integrate our own thoughts into things they already agree with by sticking an idea into another one they already agree with. You like X, and because Y is similar to X, you should like Y as well. Advertisers anchor their breakfast cereal in the image of a kind mother feeding her children a nutritious meal. Politicians anchor their war plans in the idea of national defense. And a slew of other professional influence workers do the same thing every day. As you can see from our examples, neurolinguistic programming is a sophisticated and intriguing subject that is also a popular topic in many fields. This school of thought is practically the bread and butter of lawyers, who must persuade 12 jurors of the validity of any idea, no matter how absurd. We won't be able to cover everything here, but be aware of the fundamentals of the procedures as laid out. Takeaways: learn to employ positive sentence structure to help your cause. By utilizing power words, you can persuade people and subdue foes. To hack your target's mind and convince them to agree with you, build rapport and employ innuendo. Use argument strategies to locate a gap in whatever problem you're dealing with right now. Additional persuasion techniques. It should come as no surprise that the internet is a fertile ground for the development and conduct of psychological warfare. The common internet troll is at the bottom of the ladder. A person who is uninterested in the current debate and simply publishes postings to enrage someone, then sits back and laughs as the enraged flames come in. The loosely gathered internet group Anonymous is barely a notch above that. The Church of Scientology, politicians, and corporations have all been targeted by this group, with varying degrees of success. The use of the Guy Fawkes mask, made popular by the film, is noteworthy. For example, V Vendetta. The mask, which is a mashup of Guy Fawkes' face from British history, is intended to intimidate and perplex. Anonymous members portray themselves as an untraceable online activist gang. While their tiny attacks are hardly more than petty harassment, it shows that psychological warfare can at least draw attention. The professionals are a couple rungs up the ladder. In following chapters, we'll delve deeper into each aspect of the professional internet opinion manipulator. But for now, we'll only go over the basics of astroturfing. Astroturfing gets its name from the artificial grassroots backing it receives. A group of hired internet forum users masquerading as ordinary citizens and attach themselves to a political or commercial issue that benefits their employer. Examples to think about. Tobacco firms formed the National Smokers Alliance in 1993, which launched an aggressive campaign of outrage over tobacco legislation. When the U.S. government started prosecuting Microsoft for antitrust law violations, the company formed the Americans for Technology Leadership Group in 2001, which flooded political and legal battles with support for the company. To some extent, AstroTurf has been used in almost every political campaign. Several rent-a-mobs were hired to protest the vote recount in Florida and demand that Bush be proclaimed the winner during the 2000 Bush-Gore primary election in Florida recount fiasco. Ron Paul's 2008, 2012 and Bernie Sanders' 2016, 2018 presidential campaigns both enlisted a sizable group of astroturfers to help them out. Both candidates enjoyed tremendous landslide support if the internet is to be believed, but these high internet polls failed to translate into actual numbers during the primaries and caucuses. Bernie Sanders' most recent example reveals a significant flaw. A document with precise instructions for altering online opinion about the candidate was disseminated. The document's techniques are as follows. Forum sliding is a technique for burying an unpleasant comment by posting a large number of irrelevant comments. Consensus cracking occurs when an intentionally false, unsupported claim is made, and a ring of seemingly naive posters joins in to believe the story and give stronger allegations and evidence to persuade the casual reader to accept the conclusion. This technique is used. Topic dilution. Whenever someone makes a negative post about a candidate, AstroTurf operatives descend to divert the conversation into dozens of irrelevant threads. Anyone who makes a comment on the issue is immediately attacked. The poster then defends himself against the intended trolling, and the topic becomes diluted. Information gathering. A fictitious poster is brought forward to give a contentious viewpoint, and then inquire who else shares that viewpoint. Despite the fact that the original poster is a hoax, every person who agrees with them will be thoroughly investigated and recorded. Anger trolling refers to the practice of discouraging members of the opposing side. Trolling for the sake of trolling, in the hopes of distracting those who disagree with you and making them give up in disgust. While all of these methods may sound like a bunch of kids tossing spitballs in a classroom, the techniques have been demonstrated to work time and time again. They may not be as powerful in person, but they are important strategies to remember if your psychological warfare mission takes you online. Takeaways: learn how to shape and win a discussion or argument from the experts. Wherever feasible, use the internet to sway people or conquer adversaries. In certain circumstances, it's actually a lot simpler. Utilize internet astroturfers' psychological techniques in real life. If it gives you a tactical advantage, you can still dilute a topic or rage troll someone. Examples with a focus: nothing is more expensive than anything given away for free. The Japanese say, doing a tiny favor for your target is a subtle method to convince them to agree with you. It works just as well the other way around. Get your target to perform a tiny favor for you, then ask them to do a bigger favor for you. This has been studied by psychologists with people who were given the opportunity to do a modest favor for someone, such as changing a tire, before being asked their view on a contentious topic. Test subjects were more inclined to agree with someone for whom they had already done a favor than if they had not been required to do so. The sunk costs fallacy is connected to this. This is explained by the brain as follows: I've already become friends with this individual and care about their well-being. It's probably best if you just go along with whatever they're doing. Salespeople use a variety of persuasive strategies to persuade others to buy their goods. After all, it's how they make a career. Here are some examples of common sales methods. Establishing a minimum standard. The initial step in deciding to buy should be the simplest. For example, you could buy a car with no money down. Set a label. If a consumer is told that they are a responsible driver, they will be motivated to spend more for a safer, more fuel-efficient vehicle. You've instilled in them a sense of self-worth. False humility, often known as humble bragging, is when someone claims to be modest when they are not. You confess to a little flaw that has no bearing on the sale and really increases the target's faith in you. For example, admitting that you can't help yourself when it comes to giving a lovely lady a discount. False exclusivity. With this strategy, you make it appear as if your consumer has to do anything extra to obtain your sale as a reward. This is why nightclubs have been doing it for so long. To keep the riff-raff out, use a velvet rope and a bouncer at the door. Playing devil's advocate. Psychological studies have shown that when people are forced to challenge their beliefs, they will reinforce them. To put it another way, if your consumer is only moderately considering making a purchase, gently test their commitment by reasoning them out of it. They will answer with growing justifications for their purchase until they insist on it right now. Reverse psychology is another name for this. We hope you've learned something new about brain hacks as a result of this article. Some of these persuasive techniques may have even been used against you. In the following chapters, we'll get into more advanced and dirty techniques. Takeaways: learn how to persuade others to do your bidding by studying how salespeople do it. To get someone to do a large favor for you, first ask for a tiny favor. Make it as simple as possible for others to carry out your orders. To persuade people to your side or subdue your opponent, use salesman tactics. Winning the wills battle in Chapter 5. This area of intermediate psychological tactics will be covered before we go on to the darkest aspects of psychological warfare. None of these strikes are weapons grade, but they may all be useful in a pinch. Human nature is an enthralling subject to study. It can cause people to act irrationally since most people go through their days half-heartedly, without really paying attention, thanks to their overconfidence in their own skills of reason and observation. It's easy to get caught in a blind zone, where a person isn't expecting a certain strategy. Remember the notion of refuge and boldness, which states that anything works because nobody would be insane enough to actually do that. Judo on the lips. We call it linguistic judo for a reason, because it's meant to be used as a deterrent. Judo is a pacifist-based self-defense martial art. Rather than answering hostility with aggression, Judo concentrates on diverting the enemy's strikes. Practicing conflict negation in this manner is beneficial whenever possible. Every fight that you put an end to is a win for you. Verbal judo can be approached in a number of ways. Avoidance entails spotting a potential problem early on and intervening before it escalates. Withdrawing, retaining a position till a more beneficial time comes around. Changing the topic or focus of a conflict is known as deflecting. Making a settlement that benefits both parties is known as compromise. When it comes to fighting, have you ever watched a fight in a soap opera? You've never heard such nasty, caustic language delivered with the accent of a bus schedule reader. On a soap opera, two men fight. Both are perfectly silent, never raising their voices, standing 6 feet apart, not even frowning, simply scowling moodily. While the dialogue is, "I've discovered your scheme," says it, "and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to destroy everything you wished for." However, you are unaware of my ace in the hole. Betty is still with me. She was given to me by you, and I intend to retain her, and we'll make your life a miserable hell together. Oh, so that's what you're going to do. However, this is not how the real world operates. What's going to happen is that my mob cousin Vinny will be my sidekick, and he'll be quietly brainwashing Betty without your awareness. And by working together, we'll bring you to tears of misery and regret. It's like kayfabe from pro wrestling, but without the testosterone. You're a jerk, a you evil guy, you, dare you to hell. We've already covered a similar topic in this content, so we'll recommend some more reading. The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense is a book about the gentle art of verbal self-defense. Suzette Haddon Elgin, George Thompson's Verbal Judo, and Daniel Scott's Verbal Self-Defense for the Workplace. Takeaways: avoidance, disengagement, deflection, or compromise can all be used to subdue foes. Adopt a Zen master's mindset. Putting an end to a conflict is the same as winning it. Using prohibited fruit. We discussed how making your goods appear to be special in the last chapter as a sales approach. When you sell a product to the general population, sales are slow. However, if you claim that your product is only available to a select few buyers, curiosity will skyrocket. People are drawn to having the greatest amount of freedom. Thus, we perceive a missed opportunity as a constraint. Economic rules also show that a thing considered as rare becomes more valuable right away. It's a powerful form of reverse psychology, and it's worth mentioning because of the following examples. In the late 1700s, an agronomist and chemist introduced potatoes to France. Instead of just offering them, he planted a potato patch and surrounded it with armed guards, ostensibly to save the crop entirely for the king's feast. The guards were literally told to take any bribes from the peasants, who tried everything they could to get their hands on the potatoes. In the 18th century, physicians for the British Royal Navy advocated healthy nutrition among sailors in a similar fashion. Sauerkraut was recommended as a scurvy preventative because it lasted well and was high in vitamin C. The problem was that its sour flavor did not appeal to the British palate. As a result, they stored barrels of sauerkraut on board, labeled for officers' mess only. Sauerkraut was rapidly recognized as a delightful and uncommon delicacy by the sailors. Since decriminalization, teenage marijuana use has dropped from 11% to 8% in a number of European countries, including the Netherlands. It's no longer cool or rebellious because it's not forbidden. A prominent version is the Streisand effect. Actress Barbara Streisand forbade photographers from photographing her wedding, but they flew over her Malibu house in helicopters instead. The ensuing dispute drew significantly more attention to a wedding that was otherwise unremarkable. It would have been a dull page 5 article if she hadn't attracted attention to it. As it stands, it is the most well-known example of restricting something's popularity in order to increase its popularity. Bernie Madoff, the infamous Wall Street con artist, pulled out the most ambitious rendition of this yet. Even if potential victims implored him to take their money, he would publicly reject them when collecting contributions for his massive Ponzi scam. This gave the impression that he was a shrewd investor with a scary resource, rather than a regular thief. He may also argue that he turned down money because no one believes a scam artist would intentionally turn down business. The best method to sell a book, according to author Oscar Wilde, is to ban it. This is true of nearly all forms of media. If there is a debate about the content of a film, video game, book, music CD, or other product, it sells in much higher numbers. Takeaways: use the ruse of forbidden fruit to persuade people to do your bidding if possible. Taking advantage of politeness. People are social animals with a vulnerability that can be exploited. They don't want to be perceived as rude, so if you can take advantage of their good manners, they'll be more willing to agree with your ideas. Here are some noteworthy examples. Dojin Zenji, a Zen master from Japan, has a well-known anecdote. Zenji's lecture was interrupted by an unruly student who claimed Zenji was not bright enough to handle him. "Stand up here so we can argue the matter," Zenji said to the student. The student approached. "Stand over here so the rest of the class can hear you." The student shuffled to the opposite side of the room. "Come to think of it," Zenji reasoned, "why don't you take my stage and speak to all of us?" This was also done by the student. Zenji then congratulated the student for adhering to his orders and informed him he could return to his seat. Several psychological studies suggest that simply providing a reason with a request increases the likelihood of the request being granted, even if the rationale is ludicrous. The next time you need to cut in line, keep this in mind. "Can I cut in here?" is a good question to ask at the copier. "All I need to do now is make a few copies." Everyone else feels the same way, but the fact that you've drawn attention to your own need makes it seem more pressing. In 1971, The Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI went into the COINTELPRO headquarters in the United States, which was operated by J. Edgar Hoover's corrupt FBI, in order to steal records revealing the agency's civil rights violations. How did they manage to accomplish this? They searched the facility, but were unable to gain entrance to the document room they required. As a result, they simply hung a sign on a door that read, "Please don't lock this door tonight." That door had been left open by the night watchman. This method is used in at least half of all corporate espionage cases. Even if you don't have permission to be there, you can wait outside the entrance until someone else arrives, then dash to catch up. They'll keep the door open for you. If you stand in front of a door with your hands full of boxes, employees will be ready to open it for you. Takeaways. While influencing people, take advantage of people's natural desire to be courteous. Utilize your foe's acquired politeness to subdue them. If you don't get your way, force them to be impolite to everyone in public. Use people's need to be nice to persuade them to do what you want by making your request the most courteous response. Being somebody else's problem is considered one of the most beautiful 3 words in the English language. When you can't avoid being seen in more traditional ways, employ the camouflage of authority paired with the appearance of understanding what you're doing to gain access to top-secret regions. It's a ploy that's been around for a long time. Pretend to be engrossed in a busy task while walking around any business with a clipboard, hard hat, flashlight, ring of keys. They don't have to go to this specific building or other job-related items. Doors will be held open for you, inquiries will be answered, and access codes will be provided, all with the willingness to assist that one would expect from a typical office worker. Some employees may question, what is this person's purpose here? However, they'll simply shrug and say, probably somebody else's problem. The authority clipboard, together with an official-looking helmet and blue-collar suit, is also effective in persuading practically anyone to obey your commands. Direct customers where to park in a parking lot, charge admittance at a gate, and take orders at a retail kiosk. Nobody will question you if you act as though you belong there. Con artists, imposters, thieves, and crooks utilize strategies like this all the time to commit crimes. We inserted the disclaimer at the front of the content because of information like this. Takeaways. Use stealth mode whenever possible by impersonating someone insignificant and harmless. Make it appear as if the opponent you're trying to subjugate is someone else's responsibility by using body language and neurolinguistic tactics. Questioning by the cops. Is it unexpected that police officers and other law enforcement officers employ psychological warfare techniques in their work? The Reid technique of police interrogation is offered here for your educational purposes. The name Reid technique is a registered trademark of John E. Reid & Associates, a company that offers Reid technique training. This strategy is at the very least useful to know in the event of an unintentional run-in with the police. The majority of law enforcement officers in North America use this type of interrogation. This is the procedure you'll face if you're caught in the United States. Before your butt hits the chair in the interrogation room, the police undertake a factual investigation of the evidence, followed by a witness interview. So if they're interrogating you, it's because they either have a partial conviction and need your help to get a full conviction, or they don't have anything until you confess. Interrogating you will be a formality if they already have enough evidence for a conviction. The first step is to face your fears. They begin by laying out the facts of the case as well as the evidence used against you. It's possible that the proof is entirely false. There is usually considerable drama involved, as though your eventual conviction for the offense has already been decided. Detective walks in with a massive file folder, which may merely contain a ream of blank paper, places it on the table, flips over a few pages, and shakes his head as he looks at you. This time, you're in deep trouble. Bub, we've got you covered. It's on videotape, and we've got it. This is the size of the file we have on you. You've already been found out by your lover. One of the witnesses is a judge. Similarly, to establish that they're on the correct track, they'll search for evidence of squirming on your part. Words are not as effective as actions. Theme creation is the next step. Forget about receiving your tale. They'll tell you what they think happened first. They'll start downplaying the crime at this point, as though it's not such a big deal. They're giving you the opportunity to defend your conduct by blaming the victim. If you do, they'll smile and write it down. The next stage is, if you try to refute it at this point. Step 3. Refrain from making any further denials. You'll get a chance to speak later, but for now you need to listen. You'll usually be told, the idea is to discourage you from saying the key words "I didn't do anything." because doing so will enhance your confidence and make it more difficult for you to sweat a confession afterwards. However, see step 4, overcome obstacles. This isn't the same as saying no. An appeal to logic is referred to as a counter-argument. I couldn't kick the dog because I have a dog. I love dogs, and I'm a member of the ASPCA in PETA. Do you see what I mean? An objection based on logical argument, as opposed to a denial, is a sure evidence that you're guilty as hell and a liar with your pants on fire. The investigator will pounce with pleasure on it and say something along those lines, of course you care about animals. Which is why this one instance reveals a slip of judgment in someone who is otherwise a good, moral, and upstanding citizen. Isn't it the case? No, moron. You just confessed to the lapse in judgment by nodding your head. Step 5. Earning the trust of the suspect. You must be under a lot of stress at this point. I'm sure it's difficult for you, poor suspect, to be a repeat offender. I'm your friend here, buddy. Anyone can see why you did it. After all, the stress had built up to a point where it was becoming unbearable. Things got out of hand because you were inebriated. It was inevitable for the slacker. They went a little too far this time. You were in your early 20s and in desperate need of funds. We are aware of your concerns. We'll do everything we can to assist you. Look for people moving in on you, invading your space, making a sympathetic gesture, or offering you a drink or a cigarette, alluding to the fact that confessions can lead to a lesser punishment. Why are you subjecting yourself to this when you could simply give up? Simply tell us what occurred. You'll feel a lot better. And we want you to feel good because we love you. Why confess now and ruin the fun if you've gotten this far? The show is just getting started, and we're only on number 5. Step 6. Taking advantage of failure. If you are guilty and aren't a pathological psychopath, you should be crying right now since you broke a genuine law and wounded someone. They're looking for indicators of a nervous breakdown, such as a drooping head, remorseful tears, shamefully concealing your face with hands, darting your beady eyes from one face to the next in a mute pleading for pity, and so on. There will be a brief moment of stillness as the room waits for you to confess to the heinous crime you have committed. Theirs, if you still won't speak. Step 7. Alternatives should be presented. If you're still having trouble, a new round of theme development will begin. The difference between 2 or more instances will be your purpose for committing the crime. One will make you sound more innocent. The dog pooped on you, so you kicked it away, while the other will make you sound more incriminating. You are to dogs what Jeffrey Dahmer was to small boys, and we'll make sure it reads it on the sign over the electric chair. That's all the choices you've got. You don't have any other choices. So, I'll tell you about them once more. Back and forth, back and forth. You're becoming tired. Think it's best to admit to the weaker hypothesis than to get convicted for the more difficult theory. Better not assent next time when they repeat the innocent explanation. Gotcha. Step 8. Now it's time for you to begin singing. They'll usually bring in another officer or detective or 2 once they see even the faintest evidence of compliance or capitulation to any of the foregoing approaches. If there are at least 2 witnesses, and the more the better, confessions carry more weight in court. These new people appear out of nowhere, who walked in smiling at you from behind the 2-way mirror, and who are still smiling at you as you confess your heart to them, making you feel very lighted up and pleased. It feels so wonderful to get it off your chest, with all these approving people suddenly popping up, waiting on your every word as you, the confessor, take the stage. Oh, what a beautiful finish. The interrogation will soon be completed. When you're finished, you almost expect the audience to erupt in applause, but instead. Step 9. Taking notes, recording it, returning you to your cell phone, and so on. You're back in a gloomy prison, unhappy as ever. But investigators are poring through your every meticulously recorded phrase in preparation for your short trial and one of history's most astonishingly long sentences. In any case, that's how by-the-book method works. Anything else is off the record, and rightly so, because the psychological tactics for getting information out of people who don't want to communicate are barely scratched in this content. Unlike compulsion and torture, the guys in blue use a variety of approaches, all of which are legal. Takeaways. When you require information on someone, use the interrogation script, which should be customized to your situation. Use the read techniques, conversational techniques to deceive your opponent into confessing when it's beneficial. Obtaining a confession from someone who has committed a crime or trespass might be used against them as leverage. The Kansas City Shuffle is a dance routine that originated in Kansas City, Missouri. The Kansas City Shuffle is the name of a type of con that is so refined that it stands alone. The main premise is that you have a target who is aware that a con is taking place, so you purposefully lead them to suspect the wrong con while pulling off the correct one. It's a trick used by stage magicians to deceive the audience, such as showing nothing up my sleeve when the real trick is only sleight of hand. This is also a popular tactic in warfare, namely in real-world nation-to-nation conflict. When the Allies landed in Normandy on D-Day during World War II, they were able to spread enough misinformation to persuade Hitler that Normandy was only a diversion and that the true invasion destination was Calais, when it was actually the other way around. The British Operation Mincemeat took place during World War II. Fake documents were placed by British intelligence and caught as a result. German intelligence expected an invasion of Greece as a result of the documents. Thus, German forces deployed defensive soldiers to the country. Invasion of Sicily by the British. Propaganda and disinformation are so important in international conflict that they will be given their own section later. Kansas City is a city in Missouri. Shuffle methods are so ubiquitous that they're frequently used as a plot device in fiction. It's been shown in dozens of heist and spy films over the years, from the Ocean's 11 series to the James Bond franchise. The average listener of this audio is unlikely to have access to the kinds of resources required to pull off intricate heists. A smaller version, however, can be used. If your target guesses you're working on a plan, for example, you can lead them to the erroneous conclusion. From here, things get a lot more difficult. Until now, all of the strategies discussed in this content have been of dubious morality. They can be justified for either moral or immoral reasons. However, the part we're about to enter is called psychological attacks, and if you're found committing any of these, you could face legal consequences. So be cautious. Takeaways: give someone a misleading target whenever they suspect you of utilizing subtle deception or conniving them. To improve your stealth mode, use deception. It's fine if people think you're up to something as long as they don't know what you're up to. Psychological attacks. Chapter 6. This is going to be a difficult chapter. We'll be discussing degrees of violence that are at the very least socially unacceptable, if not unlawful, and in some cases, even illegal under international law. Those who dismiss psychological violence as a real issue need just consider terminology like white torture. White torture is a sort of non-physical torture used in jails by some of the world's most brutal governments, as well as by the US in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Sensory deprivation, isolation, solitary confinement, threats against one's family. White noise, being forced to wear restrictive clothing and stand in stressful positions. Sleep deprivation, loss of all privacy, and cutting the prisoner off from all information are only some of the methods used. Prisoners in some facilities are housed in cells that are too small to lie down in, are subjected to bright light and constant noise, are never allowed to see or hear a human face, are not provided with clocks or windows to keep track of time, and are fed the bare minimum of nutrients through a tube. Anyone who avoids such treatment will be psychologically traumatized for the rest of their lives, if not absolutely insane. Because these techniques aren't considered genuine torture, they are employed to get around Geneva treaties and human rights regulations. Because they can't be proven because no physical scars are left, and because guards are more inclined to comply. People frequently ignore mental discomfort, claiming that it's all in your head. However, as these cases demonstrate, your mind is actually the worst location to be hit. The use of white torture techniques in troubled teen facilities, of all places, is another disturbingly widespread practice. These are institutions where teenagers with a criminal or disciplinary history, or whose parents are simply tired of caring for them, are dropped off, such as teen boot camps, religious boarding schools, and other organizations. The youngsters are subjected to a variety of white torture techniques, as well as peer pressure and group social violence. In the name of tough love, the kids are encouraged to take part in each other's misery, such as encircling and harassing the victim, creating a cult-like atmosphere. Activists are seeking to dismantle the legal safeguards that these organizations enjoy, but they remain entrenched in the American juvenile justice system for the time being. So, without further ado, here are some psychological attacks that can be used in a variety of situations. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a type of psychological abuse in which the victim is led to question their own sanity. It gets its name from the 1938 stage play Gaslight, in which a man gradually drives his wife nuts by disrupting her reality. An example would be if a group of individuals in your home decided to steal something from you when you weren't looking. Then when you inquired about it, Everyone conspired to make it seem like it never occurred and you were making it up. You might also haunt someone with a guilty conscience by creating ghostly sound effects and unexplained frightening events to convince them that they are being followed by a ghost. Manipulative spouses and parents are quite unafraid to pull such a ruse. Some parents would do this to persuade their children that they have fake memories in order to keep a family secret hidden. A divorced parent with a new husband, for example, would try to persuade a small child that the new spouse had always been a family member. All it takes for domestic abusers is a pattern of deception. After abusing the victim, the abuser makes justifications like "you made me do it," persuading the victim that the violence was their fault. When a person is powerless to flee, a systematic practice of bending the facts can do a lot of damage. It's the driving force behind psychological phenomena like Stockholm Syndrome, in which the victim declares an inextricable emotional bond with the assailant and promises to defend them. Stockholm Syndrome can be triggered in a matter of days by sociopaths who abduct prisoners. Setting the victim up to fail is another form of mental abuse. An abuser may assign a seemingly simple but actually hard chore to the victim, such as doing all of the laundry in 1 hour. Then they sabotage the washer, forcing the clothing to be hand-washed. The victim is subsequently convinced that they have failed and is subjected to a punishment that they deserve. It's also quite simple to gaslight someone without their knowledge. One example in psychiatry is the Martha Mitchell effect, in which a sane person's assertions are misdiagnosed as the result of delusions or hallucinations. It's named after Martha Mitchell, wife of Attorney General John Mitchell during the Nixon administration, whose claims of a criminal conspiracy involving White House officials were initially dismissed as psychotic fantasies. When the infamous Watergate scandal emerged, the world was shocked. Mitchell was later dubbed the Cassandra of Watergate after being vindicated. The Asch conformity experiment, which was developed in the 1950s, is an even more useful example. It's quite straightforward. You have a test room with a large number of students. The class is given an elementary task to solve on the chalkboard. However, only one student is the actual test subject. The rest are participants in the experiment. All of the planted kids are to read the problem aloud and give the incorrect answer. More often than not, the test participant will adjust their answer to fit in with the rest of the group. This isn't a subtle statement. It can be as simple as determining which of 3 lines is the longest. The answer could plainly be B, but if all of the other students responded A, the test subject would also change their answer to A. A prisoner of the repressive government is tortured until he learns to reason that 2 + 2 = 5 in George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. 2 + 2 = 5 has become an internet meme for coercive institutionalized brainwashing as a result of this well-known incident. Gaslighting is an integral part of the brainwashing process. Because you're aiming to transform someone's entire frame of reality, it's a good idea to knock down their previous sense of reality before rebuilding them in your ideal. The concept of gaslighting has so many versions that it's practically impossible to keep track of them all. In reality, whenever a person in charge leads those under them to a purposefully incorrect conclusion, some type of deception is used. A boss may gaslight a secretary they don't like at work in order to push them to resign. A gang of student bullies may form at school and target one student. As yet another inventive step in their campaign of misery, they gaslight the victim. A drill sergeant in the military may gaslight one of the privates under his command in order to get them to either shape up or quit. Gaslighting can be defined as anything that could be classed as head games. Now, it's rare that the typical person has the financial means to carry out an intricate campaign of slow psychological assault in a Gothic period setting. Small alteration, haphazard occurrences of changing someone else's reality, on the other hand, can be pulled off with little planning, although the effect may not be long-lasting. A pattern of cumulative effects over time, if carried out consistently, might result in the target's grasp on reality becoming progressively shaky. While gaslighting cannot cause true mental diseases, it can have the same effect as delusional thinking. Takeaways: take advantage of your opponent's proclivity to doubt their own reality. To acquire the upper hand in circumstances, rely on folks who aren't paying attention. Use gaslighting logic to persuade your adversary that the disagreement is their fault, that you've just done them a favor, and so on. Head games should be used rarely and surgically. Catfishing. If gaslighting is the act of fabricating events to deceive someone, catfishing goes one step further by fabricating an entire person. Catfishing is a more contemporary concept, named after the documentary film Catfish, which depicts a person being led astray by the creation of a false character. Catfishing is a term that is recognizable to anyone who has used the internet. It only needs the development of a phony social media page on which you engage with someone else while convincing them that they are communicating with a real person. To put it another way, it's simply lying, but with the added step of constructing a massive, sophisticated system of lies to the point where you've created an entire false life. Catfishers abound on online dating platforms, the majority of whom are scammers from third world nations. The fraudster establishes a phony profile and uses the dating network to send romantic come-ons to potential victims, luring them in. Soon after, incidents and accidents occur, in which the phony profile was going to meet with the victim when he or she got a flat tire or was abducted and needs the victim to send money to assist them out. Various scams are carried out. Then the profile is abandoned, leaving a befuddled target wondering if such a person ever existed. There wasn't any, of course. Catfishing is similar to gaslighting in that it can be done for goals other than defrauding people of their money. For example, internet trolls frequently create multiple bogus sock puppet identities and then bombard a victim with numerous harassing messages from what appear to be multiple people. Attacks from a single target are easier to dismiss as some nut bugging me, but when 5 individuals appear to be saying the same thing, you're more likely to flee the setting. At the very least, it causes consternation. If that's the case, you've been duped, because the seeming crowd of peers mocking you has caused you to doubt your own perception of reality. Catfishing, like internet astroturf, is a frequent tactic used by companies, organizations, and other entities to promote their cause on the internet. Catfishing, on the other hand, implies a more involved, personal campaign. In fact, cyberbullying laws are beginning to recognize catfishing as a form of online abuse. Megan Meyer, a teen who was pushed to suicide by what turned out to be an adult lady who did not like her and constructed phony social media identities, including a fake boyfriend, to torment Megan, was the inspiration for one such rule implemented in some U.S. areas in 2007. This demonstrates how games involving social media accounts can quickly become hazardous. Catfishing has also been employed by law enforcement to catch pedophiles. When a pedophile tries to meet the supposed minor for sexual encounters, the pedophile is met with a set of cuffs instead. Vice cops create fake profiles for underage children and interact with chat rooms and message boards. When they attract a pedophile attempting to meet the supposed minor for sexual encounters, the pedophile is met with a set of cuffs instead. Private investigators who are looking into cheating spouses would occasionally construct false social media accounts with the same goal of entrapping the subject. When you realize how frequent catfishing is, it's difficult not to be wary about online encounters. Indeed, human nature and the law of averages indicate that you, the reader, have most likely engaged in some type of online fraud yourself, whether innocently or jokingly, and are aware of how to avoid it. It's simple. Don't worry. We've learned not to assume that everyone who clicks the I'm over 18 button is genuine. Catfishing makes the internet appear to be a terrible thing. Should we place blame on the medium? If you believe so, your moral panic hypothesis is about to be blasted to smithereens. Video games and the internet are both examples of media. Prior to the invention of home consumer electronic devices, individuals had to find alternative methods to escape reality. Moral guardians say that the internet is a hotbed of lewd yearning that tempts our kids to sin. But before cable, there was the Spice Channel, nudie movie theaters, porn magazines, and live nude girls performing behind smeary shatterproof glass. All the way back to cave paintings in Tassili and Ager during the Neolithic era, people used to engage in socially deviant behavior, and all kinds of cons, both long and short, before the internet. Every generation has had its social sickness, a media fixation and diversion obtained cheaply, exercised alone, and surrounded by moral guardians who declared it to be the end of humanity. There has never been a cloudy paradise with crystal spires and togas where people were free of addictions and zealously followed diversions. Humans, once their basic wants at the bottom of the needs pyramid are met, become into lotus eaters, no matter what is available. We've been through it before, we're going through it now, and we'll get through it again. Of course, we've always had Professor Harold Hills, Jack Thompsons, and Tipper Gores here to lecture us on the latest developments, entertainment, and how it's dooming us all to be hairy-palmed freaks until, of course, we buy their snake oil to rescue ourselves. So, we live in an internet-enabled world. Use it intelligently and defensively. Takeaways. Use catfishing via the internet to construct anonymous personas targeted towards the person you're trying to influence or the enemy you're attempting to subdue if it's advantageous in your situation. It doesn't get any more stealthy than that. Propaganda. Our first two examples are focused on a single individual. But propaganda is a similar concept that targets the general public or at least a huge target group. Propaganda is an enthralling topic that deserves at least a semester of media studies to fully grasp. But it all boils down to disseminating lies, or at the very least a skewed version of the truth, in order to distort and spin the facts to your advantage. In both war and peace, all governments, as well as all faiths and corporations, engage in some form of propaganda. There are no exceptions to this rule. We discussed Internet AstroTurf a few pages ago, which is similar to propaganda in that it has the same goal of spreading disinformation but is done secretly. Remember that propaganda does not have to be dishonest. It might just be misleading or one-sided. The point is that it's meant to persuade the audience to adopt a particular viewpoint or frame of mind. Government propaganda has a lengthy and well-documented history, particularly during times of war. We have a plethora of posters and other media from World War II. Even cartoons were involved in WWII propaganda, with popular names like Bugs Bunny and Donald Duck defeating the Axis powers. These cartoons may be replayed eternally on YouTube. Political propaganda during conflict can have a variety of goals. It can be directed at the home front in order to motivate troops to fight the enemy. It can be used to make accusations or establish a case against the country's adversary from afar. It could be used to dissuade people from forming coalitions. It can even be directed towards the hostile country directly. One famous example is the United States dumping disinformation leaflets over battle zones in order to demoralize troops. Whether you're utilizing propaganda in psychological warfare or guarding against it, you should be aware that propaganda makes assertions based on logical fallacies. Here's a rundown of some of the more prevalent logical fallacies employed in propaganda during wartime. Attacking the target rather than what they do or say is known as ad hominem. War posters depicting offensive caricatures of Mussolini and others are egregiously evident. We're all in this together is a call to action, motivating the troops to achieve a common goal. The goal is always to elicit a response. Fear appeal. The enemy is always portrayed as a frightening, urgent threat. The moral high ground. Isn't it true that we're always on the side of justice and liberty? Using gaudy and frightening depictions to oversell your case is a form of deception. The whole list of logical fallacies has become so large over the years that there's even a fallacy about being excessively preoccupied with fallacies, as parodied in P.T. Arbovich's internet webcomic strip Doomed to Obscurity. As a result, we won't be able to include them all here. However, logical fallacies are also exploited in non-war situations, such as advertising and high-profile media incidents. One example is cherry picking, which occurs when manufacturers of specific products reveal a clinical test that demonstrates their product is more successful while ignoring the other studies in which it failed. Propaganda is more correctly referred to as gossip on a personal level. If you try it in your office, you'll be caught in no time. However, if you're cautious to slip in minor information into talks, you can disseminate some great ideas without anyone knowing where they came from. Takeaways. Always give positive press to yourself and the individuals you want to influence. If you want an untruth to be widely accepted, spread it. If you think it will be useful, do it ahead of time. To phrase disputes, use propaganda techniques such as logical short circuits. Most of the time, this aids in persuasion. Look for propaganda anywhere you can. Consider how this is supposed to shape your thoughts. How can I employ the same strategy? Brainwashing. The darkest and most harmful kind of psychological dominance is brainwashing. A brainwashed person is no longer a thinking individual, but rather a puppet of their master. Religious cults use brainwashing as a strategy, and many of them have had disastrous effects. In 1974, the People's Temple cult in Jonestown, Guyana, led by Reverend Jim Jones, saw over 900 people commit themselves. All of these people were persuaded to cue and drink poisoned drink mix, some of whom even gave it to their infants in arms. The Branch Davidians compound in Waco, Texas, was involved in a bloody standoff with the FBI in 1993. Instead of surrendering, 80 members died in a reversal charge into their compound, which was already on fire. The Order of the Solar Temple attempted multiple global mass suicides between 1994 and 1997, with 74 deaths occurring around the equinoxes and solstices. Heaven's Gate, a California cult of UFO-worshipping web developers, committed mass suicide in 1997, with all 39 members found dead after their leader convinced them that they would all be whisked away on a spaceship flying behind the comet Hale-Bopp. All of this demonstrates the fatal potential of indoctrination. On a much smaller scale, Some groups suggest that all religious instruction in children should be compulsory. Brainwashing is the same as indoctrination, and some abusers or serial kidnap rapists have gone so far as to claim one victim at a time to keep as a virtual slave who was indoctrinated into accepting their abductor as their life partner using the Stockholm Syndrome effect. Complete brainwashing and cult subject control follows a very strict schedule. All of these people have established a method. Thought reform entails fundamental shifts in the target's mindset. See the previous sections on propaganda, gaslighting, and other forms of deception. Isolation is the most critical element to consider. To thoroughly dominate someone, you must isolate them from any outside influences. Cult members are frequently prevented from viewing television or speaking with their families, creating a situation where the cult leader is the only source of income. Cult members are not allowed to have their own money and must live with the cult leader, eating just what they are allowed to eat. Fear is the primary tactic used in cult brainwashing to rule. The cult leader persuades the followers that they are in great danger outside the cult complex. All disobedience is likewise severely punished by the cult leader. Demands for devotion. Finally, cult members must dedicate their lives, brains, and blood to the cult leader's cause. They devote every waking hour to assisting their commander and fulfilling his purpose. The ultimate in psychological warfare is keeping individuals in a cult. It's also beyond the scope of most people's abilities, which is a huge plus. However, brainwashing is a little more prevalent, but it's also a lot more involved than most individuals are willing to go through. Fortunately, our journey has come to a conclusion. We haven't been able to discover a higher level. Takeaways. Hopefully, you will never have to travel this far. But, in any case, learn from the brainwashers' methods. After all, it's all about keeping people under control. Conclusion. We hope you've learned something new and enjoyed our journey through the world of psychological warfare. You've learned some nasty tricks and came across some terrifying mental combat powers. Hopefully, you won't use what you've learned to become someone we'll read about in the press tomorrow. Is it possible to utilize psychological warfare for good? As the section on police questioning demonstrated, it can certainly be utilized to aid in the capture of criminals. If you believe your government is doing a good job, then deploying psychological warfare methods is a good thing. It's for the greater good if your greater cause is warranted enough that removing the snoopy office clerk who is impeding your goals is well worth the trouble. It's a good thing if it helped you win a dispute with your child's school principal when they were acting like a typical obstructive bureaucrat. Is psychiatric dominance unethical? Is it really that different from other sorts of conflict, other from rationalizing it? As long as you aren't leading a suicide cult or wrecking someone's life. You don't want to go around punching people. So if you obtained what you wanted with a kind phrase, that's surely not against the law. If you use the principles and examples in this content, the worst thing people can say about you is that you are manipulative. To be sure, that's a weakness, but it's one that CEOs, politicians, religious leaders, and even the rare cat can all be accused of. As a result, the techniques in this content must be used with caution. It is not our moral responsibility to conceal information simply because it could be used to commit a crime. The open disclosure of psychological manipulation tactics helps you become a stronger individual against the same tricks being used on you. Just as open information in the art of lockpicking helps the security industry know how to combat a lockpicker. Rest assured, the evil people already have all of this information. Isn't it true that psychological warfare has to be a negative experience? No, we discussed how the best sort of psychological dominance is simply being a gregarious person who is well liked at the start of this piece. However, a force larger than this audio has already created the foundation for us. We owe a great deal to Dale Carnegie's seminal book How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936. We can't say enough about Carnegie's original classic, which has sold over 15 million copies worldwide. Eric Berne's 1964 book Games People Play is a second good read on interpersonal relationships. It's a more in-depth examination of the kind of one-on-one psychological conflict humans engage in on a daily basis. Authored by one of the first psychiatrists to consider the topic. Barbara Walters' book How to Talk with Practically Anyone About Practically Anything is the third and last recommendation, which may seem like an unusual pitch. Walters is the same well-known news anchor from ABC's 20 over 20 news program. Walters has interviewed people from various walks of life and has taught them amazing conversational skills. Following her suggestions will improve your social skills and give you a foot in the door to influence people without their realizing it. At the very least, this content should instill confidence in your daily activities. To be a good psychological fighter, you don't have to conquer the world. create a worldwide conspiracy, or be a master spy. You may just polish things up in your daily life by having that little bit of an edge, that insight into what makes people tick, how they can be wound, and where to seek for squeaky gears. Try out those palm reading methods from Chapter 1. At the very least, you can be the life of the party. Don't do anything you can't manage because you're ambitious. Give it some time. Assume the role of Zen master. Wait for the right moment to plant your seeds. Because psychological warfare is more of an art than a science. Your instincts will guide you when it's time to act. Don't be afraid of your gut instinct. It's simply your brain telling you something without bothering to explain why. Also keep in mind that many people use these strategies but have no idea what they're named. While competing for your promotion, your coworker may play games with you. Your supervisor may be looking for a method to promote his nephew ahead of you. It's possible that your phone company's customer support representative is attempting to persuade you to upgrade to a new data plan. But if we've done our job correctly, you'll be aware of everything. We'll say it again. Thank you for spending time with us. And be cautious out there.